Hi, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about prioritizing self-care. And I'm Amanda Scoggins. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And today we have Danielle Peters with us. Welcome.
Hi, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. My name is Danielle Peters, and I'm a marriage family therapist. I specialize in working with parents with special needs, and a really big part of that is prioritizing self-care. And so we're going to talk about that today.
Great. Well, with that, what is self-care? Let's start off with a basic explanation of what self-care is.
Okay.
Do you mind starting us off, Danielle?
No, not at all. So self-care really is just making sure that you have time for yourself. And, it can take many, many different forms, as we're going to talk about as we move on a little bit. But it really is just making sure that you have a little bit of time in your day that's for you.
I always like to think of self-care to that analogy of when you're in the airplane and they tell you, please put your mask on before you put your child's on. And it's so counterintuitive, but it's that piece of we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others, whether we're parents or caretakers or working in the field ourselves. So why is self-care so important?
So, well, if we continue with that analogy of the airplane and the oxygen, if you think about it, if you run out of oxygen while you're trying to put somebody else's mask on, neither of you are going to survive. But if you put your mask on first, you will be able to make sure that the other person has oxygen and both of you will get through this alive. So, that's one of the reasons why it's so important is because as a parent, you have to be able to get through the day-to-day and you're in this for the long term. So self-care keeps you moving so that you can take care of everybody else.
Stable. Hi.
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 I don't know who froze.
I'm not sure who froze. At first you froze and then you disappeared and my screen went black. But the last thing that I heard you say was as parents, like why self-care is so important for parents. So fantastic answer so far, but I think that's just where you start off.
Okay. So you heard me finish it?
Yes, I heard you finish the explanation as to why self-care is important, and then you were going into why as parents it's so important, which is such an important piece of what you're saying.
Okay. So as parents, the reason that self-care is so important is that we are in this for the long haul. This is not something that we do for 5 hours, for 7 hours, for 24 hours. This is something that, lasts a lifetime. We are caring for our children, whether, it's caring for them as they move out and all of that, but we are caring for our children over the long haul. So we need to be able to be there for them emotionally, physically, all of that between now and, for the long haul.
And it's so different for every child and parent and every person out there, how long they're going to need to be supporting. And so it's important to have those self-care routines and behaviors ingrained into your own habits. And it really models for your kiddos how to do that later on in their lives as well. Is self-care the same for everybody, or are there differences that you see in self-care? Because sometimes I hear self-care and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's like yoga and eating right, but it just seems like it's not that basic. Could you give us a little bit more information on that?
So, well, everybody's different, and that's part of the reason why self-care is different for everyone. For one person, it may be, yoga, it may be eating right, it may be, it may be taking a run. But for another person, or it could be like socializing, seeing friends when we can, doing things like that. But for another person, it might be, spending an extra 15 minutes in bed in the morning, taking some time to yourself and just, it could be hiding in the bathroom for an extra 10 minutes. It really is different from every person because what builds up every person is different.
Right, exactly. Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Please go.
So, and then, one of the things that makes self-care so important is that sometimes, because as parents, it can be so exhausting to be in the day-to-day. And as parents, so it's more important for us to get self-care because so many people depend on us. But at the same time, we have less time and energy for self-care because other people rely on us. And the hard part is that sometimes when we haven't gotten enough self-care, that things like burnout happens, and things like you can end up with depression or anxiety, because that's part, or even addictions, because that's our body telling us that we need more self-care. So it's really important to provide ourselves with that self-care so our bodies and our minds don't try to get it in other unhealthy ways.
Right. And what I found for myself, because I'm also a mother as well as being a professional and a board certified behavior analyst, and in this helping field, you often overlook the need that you have to take care of yourself so that you can continue on taking care of others. And I noticed that so much more when I became a parent myself. It was really one thing when I was living it and preaching it before I had a child. But as you said, being a parent is all day, all night. People will say like, oh, I'm off work. Thank goodness it's Friday. And parents are like, well, I'm off of my career job and off to my other job as a full-time parent. And we forget that we need to integrate our supports into our parent life as well, from a professional perspective. And something that I so enjoy about ABA is that it talks about individualizing programs for clients. And really, when you apply that to parents or behavior technicians or anybody in the field who's supporting that client, we want to individualize the self-care that we're identifying for ourselves to use. Because as we know, a reinforcer is anything that increases the future likelihood of a behavior, right? And for some people, when you say great job, that's a reinforcer for them. They're like working for that next great job. But there's some people like myself who, when someone tells me great job, I actually don't, it doesn't increase the likelihood of my behavior in the future. I like high fives more than I enjoy great jobs. And I think when we apply that to self-care, it's the same thing, is that each of us take in our sensory feedback from our sense modes. So like smell, hear, see, touch, and taste so differently. And it's about trying out what works best for you and really shaping that self-care routine to what works best for you. One of the examples that I'd given was listening to music, but we all have different genres of music that we listen to. And I even find, I don't know about you, Danielle, but I find on some days, I really want to listen to music that has a huge bass in it. But on other days, that self-care that I need is just this light melody. Yeah. Do you find that self-care needs change day to day? Or are they kind of like the same?
I find that it's definitely a day-to-day thing. And one of the things that I suggest for my clients is that they have a list of self-care activities that help. So that, because some days, like you said, some days the music with the bass is going to be really helpful, and it's going to pick up your mood, and, it's really going to help. But on other days, that bass is just going to, it's going to be overstimulating. It's going to be stressful. And so on those days, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's a quiet bath. It's really having a list of things that you can go to that are in, that you can just pull out in your toolbox and be like, okay, well, today it feels like a bath, and maybe painting my toenails will be helpful. But tomorrow, maybe it's the loud music and maybe it's something else. And so it really just depends, like not even between people, but just between the day and the time of what's going to work better. I mean, who knows, maybe you need to pick up and your child's asleep. You can't listen to loud music, loud bassy music at that time, but you can do a quiet bath.
Well, and I think this is an excellent time for us to sort of segue into the difference between short-term self-care and long-term self-care. What would be that difference for you? How would you explain the difference between short-term and long-term self-care?
So short-term care for me would be something that is, something you just kind of insert into your day here and there. And it's something that just works really quickly. And it's something that you don't necessarily have to do every day. Whereas long-term self-care is, and it's something that you just kind of like use as needed. And then long-term self-care would be something that you do every day that really helps you function as best as you can in the situation you're in. So an example of short-term self-care would be something along the lines of like the music that we were talking about, or a bath. But long-term self-care would be something like making sure that you're getting enough sleep every night and making sure that you're eating regularly. There's kind of a list of things that I recommend that people do as part of their like long-term self-care routines. And then there's also this, list. And then I want them to have a list of short-term things that they can just come up with as time goes on.
Right. And so from like a behavior analytic approach, the way that we sort of describe it is short-term self-care is what you're engaging in that day, that you're building on those small behaviors. You're building on breathing more often, or at least paying attention to your breathing more often. You're building on drinking water throughout the day. And that long-term self-care is that long-term goal of, I want to increase the amount of water that I'm taking in a month. I want to increase the amount of, the average amount of hours that I'm sleeping every evening. And sometimes those long-term goals can actually make it challenging for us to take those action steps towards them, because it feels so challenging to be like, I'm going to get an average of 8 hours when I'm averaging like 4 or 5 hours of sleep right now. There's no way I can do it. But when we focus on that short term and what we can do in just that day, it actually helps us get to those long-term self-care goals.
Yeah. So, today, maybe we can just focus on, getting an extra 15 minutes of sleep instead of, okay, tonight I'm going to start trying to get 8 hours of sleep. And if you're not used to getting 8 hours of sleep, that seems overwhelming and feels like too much. But, that extra 15 minutes, it makes a difference. And every time you add an extra 15 minutes, eventually you get to that 8 hours.
And it's so true what you're saying. And I think that's why it's so important that we're having this opportunity or platform to be able to talk about this, because often when you think of self-care, it's these goals that can be insurmountable in our minds. But when we break it down to something so small, like what you're saying, of just an extra 15 minutes of lying down in your bed with your eyes closed that day, that is a perfect goal. And once you start engaging in that more often, it actually makes it easier in the long run. But I think that a lot of us avoid self-care sometimes because we're not able to break it down into the smaller, more manageable chunks. Yeah. And it's something that I love about ABA, something that you and I have talked about in our podcast, is that breaking down these behaviors into small, manageable chunks and checking in with your team, your care team, because you're like, if your child's in services, then the care team is actually there for you as well. If you're seeking mental health services yourself, your therapist is actually there to support you, even when you're not in session. So sending that quick message of like, hey, I was able to do 10 minutes extra sleep today, is a great way to get that reinforcement for you engaging in those short-term self-care goals so you can make it to the long term. And it makes it more likely for you to actually engage in it. I don't know if you've had that experience as well in your practice or your personal life, but I have, especially around getting in more exercise. That one's been hard for me.
Yeah, I definitely, and that's even something that we're going to talk about a little bit later, is reaching out for that support. And, you know, when you have made progress, reaching out and saying, hey, I did this, I'm feeling really good about it. That helps to, A, it helps to keep you accountable, but B, it also really helps you to get that feedback of like, hey, you know, I appreciate that you're making that small progress, because it takes small steps to get to where you want to be.
It really does. And what we have found is that it gets easier to engage in those self-care behaviors when it aligns with your values. And so it's so important for you to value your health and value your safety as much as you do your child or the clients that you support or the people in your community. Often in our field, we're yes, we are in the ABA field, we're training and teaching and learning, and in your field as well. But it's so important for us to do that same care that we do for others, for ourselves. And when we're able to align with that value, it almost makes self-care mandatory instead of, maybe.
Yeah. And I think the point you made earlier is so important, that as parents, when we're engaging in self-care, we're not just taking care of ourselves. We are modeling that behavior for our kids, and they are learning that when they're parents or when they're adults, that taking care of themselves is important. And, you know, if you think about it, like modeling that you are an important person and that you're important enough to take care of it's really important for your kids to see that's true, and to see that how you value yourself, so that when they're adults, they will value themselves as well.
And such an excellent point, because often as parents and practitioners, but parents primarily, we believe through the way we've been socialized in society that we should be perfect and we should be able to do this parenting thing with all these books that are written. And we forget that, because it's not always at the forefront of the books that we're reading, right? Is that we're humans as well. And those failures are actually successes, because then we get to have our kiddos watch us fall down and get back up again. And as you're saying, that modeling's so important. I find that as I'm getting older and older, I am starting to see a lot more of my parents in me. And really, when you think about that behavior analytically, it's that there was these behaviors that were modeled throughout your childhood, over these patterns over and over again, and they're deeply ingrained in you, and they start to come out over time. And what you're really talking about is deeply ingraining this value of yourself and taking care of yourself and what those patterns look like. And I think this is a really great opportunity for you to talk about some techniques for self-care that you can do in the moment. And I think it's the 10 ideas for self-care when you're on a time crunch, because it's one thing if you have a large, massive amount of time, but we're probably speaking to an audience that really has a short amount of time on their hands. And it'd be wonderful to hear some feedback from you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, especially I feel like right now, with everything that's going on in our world, that you know, parents especially, like, we just don't have the support that we used to, and so we don't have the time that we used to have. You know, at the very least, our kids used to be going to school, and a lot of our parents, the kids still aren't going to school. So it's really important to figure out ways to get self-care in a couple of minutes. And, you know, even, and some of this stuff, like, it doesn't even have to be a couple of minutes. Like, you can do it in the room with your child. You can do it standing over your child while they're doing distance learning or whatever they're doing for school. Like, you can do this in the moment. And it's still something that's going to help you to feel better, help you to be a better parent, and help you to move forward with what you have to do for the rest of your day. So I have a list here, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
go
Well,
ahead and.
you know, as you're speaking of that, Danielle, I'm realizing that you and I are probably engaging in self-care right now while we're on this chat, because it's a nerve-wracking thing, at least for myself, to put myself out there and to share in a medium like this, though I'm so passionate about it. But water is something that I keep in here, and I have my rings on my hand to help me, right? And it's something that we don't even notice because it's become so ingrained in our lives, but it helps us get through some of the most challenging times that we have. And I am so excited to hear about the 10 tips that you created. I know that you had created them to pass out right before the pandemic occurred. And so now I'm just so excited that we get to share it on this platform and we can have it out there. So
okay, well, so the first one that you already mentioned is water. You know, just taking a minute, there's a couple of ways that water helps, but just taking a minute to take a sip of water. First, you know, of course, it provides hydration, but it also gives you that kind of minute to just kind of take a breath and just be in the moment, so that you can go on and, you know, say your child's having a hard time. If you stop, take a sip of water, it just gives you a second to be in the moment before you respond to things. So another one that we have is deep breathing. And I know that you probably hear a lot of this from both, you know, from both your behavioral people and also from therapists in the community, that, you know, deep breathing can really help. It's when we are stressed out, our brains go into what's called fight or flight mode. And when you stop to take a deep breath, the deep breathing, it short circuits that fight or flight mode. Because if you think about it, if you're running from a bear, you're not going to stop and take a deep breath. And so if you stop and take a deep breath when you're feeling stressed, or even when your stress level is going up at all, that takes it short circuits that, and it tells your body, hey, there's nothing to be scared about right now. I'm in a safe place. And you'll see both Amanda and I take deep breaths here and there, to just kind of, you know, tell our bodies, like, yes, we are on camera, but there is nothing life-threatening about the situation that we're in. So
well, I'm so sorry to interrupt you there, but that one is such a simple one, and yet one that a parent could use at any moment, because you're in the market and your child's going into another tantrum, and all of a sudden you're going into fight or flight mode, and just that deep breath, you can access it almost anywhere.
Yeah, you can. And, you know, there are lots of like deep breathing techniques out there, but really it is just making sure that you're taking a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And that's really the part that matters. I mean, there's 4, 7, 8, there's counting to 10 and the 10 count breaths, all of that. But really it's just making sure that you're taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out.
So, right, becoming aware of your body and the fact that you've tensed up and are maybe not bringing any oxygen in.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's one of the things that it's part of the fight or flight response, is that we stop taking in as much oxygen as we need. So, okay. So another one is eating. And I think this goes towards that part that, as parents, a lot of times we forget to do the basic things that we need because we're so busy doing everything else and taking care of everybody else. But there really is a lot of times, you know, we feed the kids, but we forget to grab something for ourselves. And so eating can do a couple of things. It can just give you a minute to take a break for yourself. But it also, when we're hungry, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard the term hangry. Like, we are not ourselves, whether, you know, you have blood sugar issues or not. Like, hunger does not make us be our best person. And so taking a deep breath and eating some food can be really helpful.
That's a great one, right? And as you're talking about this, I'm realizing that really your suggestions relate to the unconditioned motivating operations that we talk about in ABA.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we tell our behavior technicians and our families to do when they're seeing that a child is sort of responding in an unexpected way, is really check this. Are they thirsty? Are they hungry? This is fantastic. Okay, thank you so much, please.
So the next one I have here is Post-it Notes. And I think, Amanda, this was one of yours. So I want to hear what you have to say about this, because this sounds very exciting.
Yes. So what I've learned in my time is that a lot of times those thoughts that we actually are conscious of are one of 1,000 other thoughts that we're having in a day. And in order for me to help guide my thoughts to ensure that they're being positive, that they're giving me the feedback that I need to stay on track with my day, to provide myself self-care, is to write on Post-it notes and post it all over my house, well, maybe not your car, because when you're driving, you don't want to read anything. But having it all over your house, your work, wherever you may be a lot. And so for parents, that might be the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room, and writing a note on there like, this too shall pass. Yeah. Take a deep breath. Smile. Remember, someone loves you. And the beautiful piece about that is it takes just a moment for you to write these kind notes to yourself one time. Spend about a minute to write a couple kind notes to yourself on a Post-it, and then you can post it up all over your house. And the beautiful thing about our brains is that when our eyes cross it, we're going to read it because we're scanning our environments all day. And this is a great way for you to get that positive feedback that you need throughout the day. And so I would really encourage anybody who's going to utilize this quick tip to think about what sort of statements really impact you. At one point in my life, for whatever reason, seeing the word pink, as you can see, I have pink all over. It elicited this sensation in my body that was so warm and pleasant. It felt like a hug on a warm, crisp, like a cold day from a blanket to see the word pink. And so writing down those statements that really bring you a lot of joy or peace or pleasant emotions inside, and putting those Post-its up wherever you frequent a lot, because that will just be a quick reminder that you don't even have to think about, because your brain's going to read it. Takes the pressure off of you having to come up with those statements. Because when we're in the moment of fight or flight, when our body is not wanting to breathe, it's often not capable, our brains aren't capable of accessing those supportive comments that we really need for ourselves to get through the moment. And like I said, one of my favorite is this too shall pass. And then the other one is you got this, with multiple exclamation marks. You got this, girl.
I can totally see you doing that and having them all over your house. I can see you like saying those things to yourself when you see that, when you walk by them. And I think that is a really good reminder of a way to help your positive self-talk and make it more automatic over the long term. Seeing those Post-it notes are going to make your brain automatically go to those positive thoughts, and it will help you to be more resilient as time goes by. So I love that idea.
Oh, thank you. And it's also a really great idea for all of our early readers, right? Because then they can start to read your Post-it notes with you, and you can use it as twofold, not just self-care for you, but helping your kiddo read and giving them high fives for doing self-care with you.
Yeah, that's really a great idea. Okay, so the next one we already talked about a little bit, but music, a noise machine, or a favorite recording. I think anything that can, if you're in a stressed out place, anything that can kind of change the atmosphere a little bit can really be helpful and just kind of get you out of that space. And, if you think about it, if you and your child or your children are having a lot of stress, if they, somebody's throwing a tantrum, somebody's, as somebody is frustrated with their homework, like changing the atmosphere a little bit, turning on some music can really help both of you get distracted, let go of that stress so that then you can come back to whatever it was that you were doing.
So true. And I really love this this quick like time crunch self-care piece for parents who are supporting children, or even caretakers who are supporting children with pretty intensive behavior challenges. I myself experienced a lot of behavior challenges when I was a kiddo, and it makes it so it is very challenging on the parents who have to support a child who has high emotionality or high behaviors that they engage in. And having a recording of your kiddo saying something sweet to you, like, I love you so much, can be so helpful in that moment, because every parent gets to a breaking point with their kiddo. That's so expected. And what is also expected is that we're able to step back from those moments and give ourselves time to de-escalate ourselves. And that is such a quick one for me. I have at least 2 recordings of my daughter when she was in a sweet place that I play for my own self. That helps me remember, okay, we're going to get through this time. We're going to get through this time. This is just where we're at right now.
Yeah. And I think the next one, having pictures of your child when you've had times that have been hard or have had good times, can bring you back to that space of like, okay, this is the reason I'm doing this, and this isn't forever.
Right. And it's actually a quick tip that they do for virtual working as well, is to have pictures up around you of the people and places and things that make you so happy, because it keeps your smile going. And then when you apply that to parenting or caretaking or whatever it might be, we are in a high stress field. And as a parent, it is a high stress job, whether or not your child has a lot of skills that they're working with or a little bit of skills. Stress and storm is part of being human. And having those photos to remind us of those times when being human is so much fun can really support us through those times when being human is not so fun. And it happens.
Yep. Okay. So the next one we have is smells. And this is one of Amanda's, but I'm going to put my 2 cents in, and then I'll let you go from there too. But one of the things about smells, the smell is very closely associated with memory. And so if you have smells that you associate with good times, smelling, say, you used to make snickerdoodles with your grandmother, having like a little sachet, I think they're called, where, you just had that smells like cinnamon and sugar, can really help you like have that feeling of baking snickerdoodles with your grandmother. And it can just take you out of the situation that you're in and just give you a couple of seconds of relaxation so that you can then move on with what you're doing. And I'll let you go with that.
Well, I so appreciate that. And often when people think of smells, especially recently, they think of like the oils and the diffusers. And that is such a challenging chain of behavior to engage in, because not only do you have to purchase a diffuser, you have to set it up. And so really having just a spray or a bottle that you put a little bit of smell on your arm with, those smells can help change the mood itself. And I would say that one of my favorite ones currently is peppermint. When I'm feeling a little bit tired, got a little peppermint and it'll get you right, it'll bring you right back up. And then orange, that sweet smell helps ground me. And it's really requires that everybody sort of experiments with what smell works best for them, because as you said, smells can be associated with different memories. And so maybe someone has a not so pleasant memory associated with peppermint, but definitely utilizing that sense mode to help provide just a momentary relief in the moment. And I think that one of the other more common in this realm is maybe the smell of coffee or tea.
Mhm.
We all perk up a little bit, like, oh, I love a green tea smell. It elicits such great memories that can support with the situation that you're in. So thank you so much for sharing your 2 cents on that too. It was fantastic. Thank you.
And I think with the smells, it's also, like you were saying, it's important to recognize that what works for one person might not work for another. Like the classic one that, if you look up what scents are supposed to do, the classic one is lavender is supposed to be very calming for some people, but I tend to be allergic to flowers. And so lavender actually makes me have an asthma attack, which is not calming, but I love peppermint which is one of my favorite smells because it uplifts me. It gives me energy, but it also for some reason calms me down. So you really just have to experiment with it. And if you like Amanda was saying, if you find something that works really well with you, there's no reason to change it, and you'll have more positive smell associations from that particular smell as time goes on. So okay. So the next one on our list is to change your temperature or rinse your face off. And this is just another one of those, like, getting you out of the situation you're in, even just for a moment. And, if you're, working with your child or something's going on, it's never a hard thing to just kind of walk over to the sink and pour some water on your face really quick. And it doesn't take any time. It doesn't, even interrupt the interaction very much, but it still just really gets you out of where you are. And a lot of times when we're stressed out, like, we have a lot of heat in our body. And so adding that coolness can give you a couple of seconds to relax a little bit. There's also, you can grab some ice from the ice maker and just kind of feel it, and it just gives you a couple of seconds to change the temperature and how you're feeling in your body, and it really grounds you into your body more than where you were before.
Oh yeah, ice will bring you really present to that moment, and I think for everybody, it's sort of your tolerance to that ice will be different. So making sure that you have a paper towel or whatever with it. But for myself, I really enjoy putting ice on the back of my neck or on my forehead, because as you're saying, in those high stress moments, our bodies are really heating up, and allowing them to cool down a little bit is one of the reasons why I carry around a handy dandy water bottle with ice inside of it, because it helps bring my body temperature down. So it's like a 2-in-1 self-care. Not only am I liquidating my body, but I'm also bringing that temperature down, that internal temperature.
Yeah.
So important. Thank you. Ooh. I love this next one. I'm excited about this one.
So the next one is to reach out for support. And, there is, where we are right now in our lives, in the world, everything, the support we normally have is not as present as it used to be. But, in a hard moment, we can still text people, we can still call people, we can still, if you have the time to get away, we could still video chat with people. And so, if you're having a hard day, say, it's just one of those days, your child is in a bad mood and they cannot let go of whatever it is, texting someone and saying, hey, I am at my breaking point, I cannot handle this, and having someone write back to you something, even just, you can get through this, or, this too shall pass, or I love you. All of those things can help you to just give you the moment to get past it.
Right. And I think that this is a really great one for me to kind of just take a moment to give an example of building up towards that long-term self-care. So when you're reaching out for support, really what you're talking about is that long-term goal of building a network of support to help with that self-care. And so those short-term goals would be, the short-term self-care would be something like maybe joining a Facebook group of peers, joining, maybe it's not on Facebook, because I know that they've been doing a lot of stuff through like Zoom or even TikTok. It's going onto those social platforms and adding yourself. And what you'll see is that, especially on the platforms for parents, everybody is really supporting each other. And that's a short-term goal, is just to add and look and see the self-care that everyone's engaging in through reaching out with each other. And then over time, you might post something on there about having a tough day today. And that allows that community to reach out and just give you a heart or tell you you got this. And that long-term goal is to build those support relationships. And I really think that utilizing those social platforms is a great way to start building that, especially for a lot of parents who are just realizing that self-care is something that needs to be important for them in order for them to continue on. And for parents who have not yet started maybe in mental health services, but you should listen to our podcast because it'll help you understand why it would be so helpful for you. And that mental health relationship is supposed to be there so that you could reach out in a crunch time and say, today's one of those tough days, and your therapist is like, don't worry, boo. I'll see you in a couple of days. Breathe. You got this. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's also this cultural part of it where, like, we don't, we assume that parents, we assume as parents that we have to do this on our own. And I think I've seen a lot about this concept of silent parenting, or I don't remember the exact term, but where all of a sudden we as a culture are starting to be more aware of the fact of how hard it is to be a parent. And I think part of that culture is that we don't speak out about the need that parents have to not do this alone, the need for support. And I think that parents of kids with special needs really have this assumption a lot of times that has been given to us by the people around us that as parents, we have to do this by ourselves. And the thing is that as time has gone on, we've gotten more and more isolated from other people, when in reality, in the past, we wouldn't have been going through this by ourselves. We would have spent more time engaging with our neighbors about what is going on in our lives. We would have had our mother living in the same house with us. We would have had more support than we have now. And so recognizing that we don't have to do this on our own. We do have so much available to us, and it's okay to reach out for help. Nobody is going to think that you're a bad parent because you've asked for help. But we have this assumption that because I need help, that there's something wrong with me. And no, there isn't anything wrong with you. There's something wrong with our culture that it tells people that that's the norm, because it's not. That's how we end up with people who are so exhausted and so overwhelmed that, that they aren't able to ask for the help that they need. And so, really giving yourself that permission.
Right, exactly. And that was really the purpose behind our podcast of It Takes a Village, because it does. It takes an entire village. And it takes, what a great segue into your last and final quick self-care in a crunch time step of one step at a time. Yeah. We don't have to do everything right away. And I would love to hear more about that from you, of taking it just one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think that as parents, we tend to get really stuck in like all of the big things, we need to, my child needs to get all of this education. He needs to learn to read, to read. He needs to learn to do addition. The house needs to get cleaned, all of this stuff. And if you think about like all of those things at once, it becomes very overwhelming. Even if you're saying like, he doesn't need to learn how to add and read until the end of the semester or the end of the year, but he needs to be doing that. Like, it's so overwhelming to think of all of the things that need to go into that. And so taking it one step at a time. So standing where you are and, prioritizing, okay, what is the most important thing right this minute? And so it's during school time. And so, okay, today we are going to, today we're focusing on the letter A, and just focusing on what is happening in the moment and what the next step is. So right now we're going to help him learn how to recognize the letter A. And then tomorrow you deal with the letter B or whatever comes next in your, in the plan moving forward, but really just focusing on what you need to do next. And this can, go ahead.
Please.
This can, apply to just a day too. I mean, if you think about all the things that a parent does in one day, it can be overwhelming. I mean, sometimes I myself, sometimes I'm up till 11 or 12 o'clock at night trying to get everything done. And if you just focus instead on the fact of like, I have too much to do today, and focus on, okay, well, right now I'm doing distance learning with my son. And then after I do distance learning, then I'm going to do the dishes. And then after that, then I'm going to do this other thing. And so but not thinking about those other two things, but right now, I'm going to do distance learning. And that allows you to get the things done that need to get done in the moment. And it takes so much of the pressure off. And honestly, you get to 9 o'clock at night when maybe you should be going to bed. And those things end up not being quite as important because the other parts of self-care and getting to sleep, it becomes more important.
Right. And often what we find, at least when we're providing ABA services, is when we go in, we tell parents, let's meet our kids where they're at that day. Each day is going to be so different and we're going to meet them where they're at. And really what we want parents to know is meet yourselves where you're at too. There are going to be some days where you're going to be able to push through all the goals and all the plans you have and get through all of your to-do items. And there are going to be days when you're not able to. And there are going to be multiple consecutive days where you're not able to, and allowing yourself that grace to do what you need to do that day with the energy that you have, and knowing that that's enough, that you're enough the way you come, just like your kiddo is enough the way that they come, is just so important. And I really appreciated your 10 quick tips. I'd love to just say them one more time if that's okay with you. Would you like to? I can do them. Whatever you'd like. I'd love to hear them just one more time so that our listeners can hear them.
I'll let you go ahead and say them if you want
to. You know me, Daniel. I love talking. Okay?
You're going to make them exciting.
Okay, great. So those 10 ideas for self-care when you're in a crunch are breathing, eating, water, putting up Post-it note reminders around your house or your workspace, music, noise machine, or a favorite recording that you have on hand, pictures, whether in your phone or up so that you can see them, smells, whatever smell works for you, rinsing your face off or changing that body temperature, whether with a piece of ice, cold water, a faucet, reaching out for support, whether it's through a quick text message or a Facebook post or a call, and then taking things one step at a time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yay. Well, thank you, Danielle. And I'm really excited for us to move into our audience question portion, where we've opened this up for audience members to ask any questions that they might have about self-care. And I just want the audience to know that we fully plan on doing more of these. So please know that if you have any other questions, that you're more than welcome to submit them and we will answer them.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to read the questions and I'll answer, and then you can put in whatever you have to put in?
Would love to. I love the way this duo works. Okay, here we go. All right, audience question number 1. Oh, what a fantastic one. Okay, how do you practice self-care when feeling fatigued every day?
Okay. So I think if this was a client sitting in front of me, I think the first thing I would say is that I'm guessing that self-care for them at this moment in time is going to be more rest. So, I would look at help them to look at their life and figure out where they can get more rest. And maybe that's prioritizing what's important and what's not right now. And, if the fatigue is really about burnout, it may take a while. Like, we may have to pull things back in their lives a little bit until they are starting to feel like they have energy again. So it could be like, okay, I'm gonna do what has to get done, but then I'm gonna take some breaks here and there. I'm gonna allow myself to sit on the couch and relax and just sit and be once in a while and cuddle with my kids and just kind of relax and rest as much as needed, and just recognize that this isn't something that they need to feel guilty about, because it's going to help them rejuvenate enough so that they can get energy later on. Do you feel like that's answering that question?
Oh, definitely. I think that you did a really great job too of helping our listeners to understand that fatigue is telling you something.
Mm-hmm.
And it means something different for every person, depending on how long the fatigue has been there, what are the symptoms of the fatigue. And really what it's telling you is to do a body scan, to really get back to those basics. And in ABA, what we call those unconditioned motivating operations. Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you hungry? Are you tired?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need more water?
Yeah.
What do you need? More activity? Do you need less activity? And it's so different for everybody, because fatigue presents itself differently in every individual. And our viewers are probably starting to see the difference between our personalities. I'm a little bit more vivacious and have a lot more energy in general. And I still experience fatigue, and a signal to me that something in my behavior needs to change.
Yeah.
And something as simple as waking up, and instead of getting right to going, I wake up and I lie in bed and I take 10 full deep breaths. Oh, that's a thought. We're going to let that be there. And something as simple as that for fatigue. But thank you so much for really helping our viewers and listeners understand that fatigue is different for everybody, and it's really a signal for you.
And I think the other part that's really important with fatigue as a parent, now that I kind of said something about it, but I want to be real clear with this.
Please.
Part of fatigue that is the most important as a parent, I think, is that we have so much guilt for taking care of ourselves. And a lot of times that contributes to the fatigue, because you don't allow yourself to rest. And when you do rest, there's a guilt feeling to it. And so part of this is going to be figuring out how to let go of that guilt when you're resting, so that you're actually getting the rest that you need, because otherwise that rest isn't going to be restful. And you're not going to end up getting what you need out of it.
Such an excellent point. And I think I love this partnership that we have, where we can really collaborate on this level together, because in ABA, everything is so individualized, single subject matter that we're doing. We're looking at one person, and to say that one person's fatigue is the same as everybody else's, and then bringing up this point of some people can get through fatigue a little bit faster because maybe potentially they're not feeling guilty about it when they're experiencing it. And so just accepting that that rest is necessary for you. Such an excellent point. Thank you, Daniel. All right, the next question. Ooh, this is a 2-part question. All right, so what can I do at home to help my child with special needs practice self-care? They're young and sometimes have moments of depression and anxiety. How can I help them?
So the first thing I would do, of course, would be to help you figure out how to tailor the self-care to your child. But I think also, Amanda and I kind of hit on this before, but really modeling self-care, you're taking care of yourself for your child, but then also helping them figure out what self-care works for them. So, is it going and taking a couple of deep breaths in their bedroom once in a while? Is it, putting some water on their face when they're feeling stressed out? Is it paying attention to what they're saying to themselves and, coming to you and saying, hey, mom, I need some help right now. I'm having these negative thoughts in my brain right now. What is it that is going to help them? But you can also help them to explore self-care. You can, YouTube has a lot of children's like meditation, children's deep breathing. You can help them find that if media isn't overstimulating for them. You can help them, with finding certain things that trigger relaxation for them. So, it might be a fuzzy blanket, it might be a favorite stuffed animal, it might be, a scented stuffed animal. I know that's kind of a weird thing, but those can be really helpful. It can be all kinds of things that can help, but just really like helping them to explore what helps them. And, they may not be able to communicate with you what helps, but you as their parent, what they look like when they're relaxing and when they are stressed or having their anxious or depressive moments. It might be, when they have a lot of anxiety, it might be them, communicating to you, whether it's by, asking straight out for a hug, or it might be them, just kind of having a sign that says, I need a hug. And it might be, you're just going and giving them a hug. Sometimes that can help. So, I think it's really exploring with them what helps, and then helping them come up with that list that we talked about before of self-care activities that help them in those moments. And then also, between you and them having a long-term self-care plan as well.
Well, and from like a behavior analytic approach, there's a few components to this. Really what we're talking about is being able to identify that there's been some sort of an internal change in us, and to place a name on what that internal change is, and then to identify a behavior or stimulus that would be helpful, and then to engage in that. And so, for instance, if you're seeing that your child is experiencing anxiety, what you might say to them is, wow, you look anxious right now. Your heart rate is going really fast. You're breathing really quickly. You're talking really fast. You're jumping up and down. That tells me that you're anxious. And what mommy does when she is anxious is I run upstairs, I do jumping jacks, I drink some water, and really making it fun to engage in those self-care, because part of this is helping our kiddos identify what their internal experiences are and pairing that with language, whether it be the picture exchange communication system or actual vocal words. And then once they've been able to identify the language to express how they're feeling, helping them to identify the different responses that they can engage in. And this is one of the reasons why I was so happy that we were able to do this webinar together, and why I'm looking forward to doing a lot more with you in the future, Danielle, is it's assumed that we should know these things, and it's actually a lot harder than you think it is, because it requires you to slow down and really be aware of what's happening inside of you and outside of you, and figuring out what helps and then engaging in it. Because it's one thing to know an answer, it's another thing to engage in that answer. Yes, right? And that modeling, especially for kiddos living with differing abilities, modeling is so important, and modeling with enthusiasm, modeling for them when they're not experiencing it. So you can have a set time every day where it's like, okay, we're going to practice something new for self-care today, and trying new things out, because what might work for you as a parent might not work for your kiddo. And that's perfectly fine. Your kids should not be exactly like you. That's what makes them snowflakes. Everybody's so different and unique. And that's what creates our tribe and our village. And so really practicing different self-care with your kiddos is helpful as well. And it could be a fun time for you too, to have like a self-care practice each day that's maybe just a minute long, and then it's in your routine and you get to play with water beads or shaving cream and dye on the table, because that could be self-care for your kiddos.
Yeah.
What a fantastic question. Thank you so much for answering that, Danielle. And thank you for asking that. Our audience is just full of that hive knowledge here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so excited about these questions. They're great.
Aren't they? And they're just a great example of how there are no silly questions. Everything should be asked, because you shouldn't be figuring this out on your own. It takes a village.
Yeah.
So our next question is, what are some things that a parent or guardian or maybe even a caretaker should look for in a licensed marriage family therapist or an LMFT?
So the first thing that is, to me, is the absolute most important is that the person is a good fit for you. And so, that really, it can be different for everybody, but it really is feeling like, of course you need to get the logistics down. Can they meet at the same time as you can? Is the way, their modality of where they can meet, does all of that work for you? Those are that's number one. But then after that, you need to look for someone that you really feel like you connect with. Like, you don't want someone that, you sit in the room and you talk to them and you don't feel like they understand where you're coming from. You don't feel like you're feeling heard by them. So you really want someone that you feel like you can trust. You feel like you can really, they really seem to understand what you're going through. They don't have to be someone who has the same experiences as you are, but they need to be able to really understand that, like, hey, when this happens, I'm feeling really abandoned or really frustrated. They need to be able to understand the experience that you're having. And then they, if they, in the first couple of sessions, if they go over their treatment modality with you and you're like, oh, that kind of sounds like a bunch of hooey, then, that might not be a good fit for you. So, looking for someone who, when they tell you, okay, this is how I work with clients, that, making sure that it feels like a realistic plan to you and going from there.
Well, and I always like to tell parents and even practitioners that asking questions of your therapist is absolutely expected. Yeah. This is your treatment and your need. And it's just like if we were coming in to provide ABA services, I better be able to answer questions and individualize a program to that client's needs, or else it's really not a good fit. And that means culturally as well. Yeah. And asking those questions, like, what is your experience? What are some treatments that you do for anxiety, or what is your experience with parents experiencing fatigue because they're supporting a child with some impactments? And coming prepared with those questions yourself is absolutely expected. And I've found that often parents and other caregivers feel a little bit uncomfortable about asking questions because they're going in to see the expert, when the reality is that you are the expert on yourself. Yep. And that LMFT is really appreciative of you coming ready with those questions, because it helps them help you even more. Do you experience that in your practice as well? Do you prefer when people actually ask you questions, or what are your feelings on that?
So, the questions are really important because, first of all, I need to know like where you're coming from and what things are important for you in treatment. And then also, if we're not going to be a good fit, like I want to know that, we want to know that early on in treatment so we don't waste a lot of time together. If I were to talk to someone on the phone, I do an initial consultation before I start seeing someone, and that's a really good time to ask all of the questions that you have is in the first session. And if it turns out that hey, this isn't going to be a good fit because say you just have something that something that's like not something that I specialize in, then it's better for you to get some referrals from me of people who do specialize in that so that you can have somebody that is a good fit for you, for somebody that understands what you're going through and is at least has some experience and maybe is an expert in what you're dealing with. So I think that's
and
really
thank you for walking us through the process of what it's like when someone does begin services with you, because it's so important for people to know that there's that initial consultation that you do where the LMFT is going to ask you questions and you're going to ask them questions.
Yeah.
And don't worry, if it doesn't work out between the two of you, your LMFT that you just consulted with is actually in their field and can refer you to other people that may be a better fit. So coming ready with your questions and knowing that if it doesn't work out there, you're going to get referrals to someone else that you might connect with. And those questions that you come with as a parent, guardian, practitioner actually help set your LMFT up to know what you need.
Yeah. And to know how to help and how to find you the help that you need.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Danielle. All right. Our next question. How do you keep from becoming too emotionally involved or just plain burned out while at work? Do you find it can be very emotionally draining sometimes? And if so, how do you cope with that? And I'm assuming they're talking about working with children with differing needs we work with kiddos with autism spectrum disorder. But I know that you support parents of children living with other impairments as well. And we do support kiddos with multiple impairments as well, but autism spectrum disorder is our focus currently.
So I think as a professional, a lot of the ways that I prevent myself from getting burnout is a lot of what we're talking about here is self-care. And for me, self-care in my professional life, one of the things that is for me is setting boundaries around my work. And things like I do take messages, but I don't respond to messages after a certain time. And, I have times that are set aside for me and my family and my self-care. So that's a really big part of it. But then there's also this part about, I have to make sure that I get exercise every day or I'm closer to burnout than I would be otherwise. And I start to get overwhelmed with everything that's going on, especially now with COVID and everything that's going on with that. It's really important that I am engaging in my own self-care so that when I'm in sessions, I can be there and be fully present with my clients and I don't end up having that burnout take over. So
yeah, as a professional, I'm a huge proponent in professionals seeking support from other professionals because we really do support families when they're in their darkest hours, experiencing some of the toughest things that they're going to experience in their lives. And it's our job to leave our judgment and our ego at the door and to come in with our humble pie and just eat it the whole time. And I like to say like our humble backpacks, just as a reminder. But that does not mean that just because we're in there with humility and we're there to be objective, that we're not picking up on the emotions that are in the household. We are only human, and there's only so much that we can do to protect ourselves from taking that on. And when you are a true caregiver with that compassion and empathy, it is very challenging not to know when that emotion needs to remain there and what to take home with you. So I'm a huge proponent in seeking services yourself for support. And I also love to just pop or debunk the myth on that practitioners shouldn't cry. I cry sometimes when things are too emotional, because I am only human, and I am compassionate, and I care, and I can't do anything but show up and do my job, and I can't fix situations. The people that we're supporting have to make those choices to make that change themselves. And so sometimes that means that I have to release without actually my client meeting their goal. I have to be able to release that tension that I've carried. And so crying at the job, probably not expected, but definitely give your supervisor a call afterwards. I mean, especially if you live at or work at Acadian, because we are here to support you through those hard times, because it's absolutely expected in the field that we're in. And without that village, for the villagers that are supporting our youth, our children, our clients, we need to all support each other on those different levels, and making sure that you're seeking that support and knowing that we all do it ourselves. And it's what keeps us here. A little bit of water and a little bit of therapy.
Yeah. I think I've seen this meme out there recently about this person that wants to find the therapist boss. The therapist that the therapist of the therapist sees, which is so true. Like, we all of us in the mental health field, it's important that we get our own help too, because we're dealing with so much. And there's no shame in that. Just like there's no shame in our clients getting help, there's no shame in us getting help as well.
Exactly. And depending on what your history is will really change whether or not, like, what emotion you're feeling when you're thinking about going to get help. And that shame and embarrassment is something that I've seen across cultures when it comes to seeking help. And it's because we're being socialized to believe that we should do this on our own. And we can't. We cannot do this on our own. There are some things we have to do on our own. But at the end of the day, we have our supports in place, our support pillars that help us be better at what we do. So thank you so much for just getting into that question a little bit deeper. I think it is so, so important for our parents to know that you getting help actually helps your kiddo, and for our behavior technicians to know that you getting support actually helps our kiddos. We self-care over everything. It's #SCO. Right? Exactly.
It helps you to continue to be the support for the families and the family for your family and the families that you work for. Because if you don't reach out for help when you need it, you're eventually not going to be able to do this job anymore.
Right. It's a piece of feedback that I receive a lot is people are like, how can you be so happy all the time and excited and energetic? And it's like, because I do my self-care work, y'all. I work very hard when I'm in my personal life so that I can show up in this way. And the only way it's possible is through that village of support and through that self-care focus that you and I have committed to ourselves. It's a high value because we know how important it is for us to be successful at what we do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. This is a great question and our last one for today. My partner has PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder and hasn't sought therapy. How do I help them see the value of therapy and self-care without pushing?
So I honestly would say to, first of all, seek therapy for yourself. Just because it is so hard to live with someone with PTSD, because you're watching someone that you care about really struggle. And so, recognizing that I'm probably need a little bit of support myself to get through this. But that modeling part of things, where you go out and you seek a therapist for this issue and you find someone that you really connect with that helps you, that shows the other person how good of an experience it can be, and it can take some of the fear away from that. And then another part of that as well is, modeling your own self-care, what you do that helps you to feel better. And then also, encouraging them to get to do self-care without nagging, because, nagging never works, but doing something along the lines of like, hey, let's go for a walk today. Hey, let's go and have a date night. Hey, let's, I'm going to watch our children for a little while. Do you want to go and, rest in the bedroom or do something along those lines? So really, seeking your own help, modeling self-care, and then encouraging self-care in a way that doesn't make them feel pressured.
Well, and I think you bring up such an excellent point when you're saying that you cannot force anybody to do anything, even though you know that therapy would be helpful, because there's so much research supporting how therapy can be supportive and effective for people living with PTSD. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the only thing that you can change is yourself. The only thing you have control over is your own behavior. And so those suggestions that you gave are so perfect, because it allows you to have that choice and control that you may be missing because you're living with a partner who's living with impactment themselves, whether it be PTSD, depression, whatever it might be that they're living with. And you start to feel so helpless because you want to be able to help, because you care so much. And by giving that actionable suggestion of modeling self-care for themselves, it also brings back that choice and control in your life that you're not feeling. And the beautiful thing is that over time, your partner will see a difference in the way that you're responding to their behavior and the way that you're responding to their triggers. And that's the important piece. It's not that by modeling, all of a sudden my partner's going to be on the healing route and we're going to be all good. It's that they're seeing that you're not going to engage in that nagging behavior, that back and forth, and you're just going to do it. And then I love your suggestion of doing it together, because it almost makes it that self-care more manageable and reasonable. Because I don't know about you, but when I experience sort of depressive dips, I'm like, oh, I don't want to get out and do anything. And then my favorite sibling, I love all my siblings, but my favorite sibling will reach out to me and be like, let's go for a walk. And it's like, okay, I'll go with you. I'm willing to do it with her, but not with myself. And so what an excellent techniques to suggest and to bring more choice and control back into the partner who's watching their partner suffer's life.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Danielle, we have so appreciated having you here for this Prioritizing Self-Care seminar. And I think it's really important for our listeners and viewers to know that they can get more information about Danielle and her services at her website at www.daniellelmft.com. So that's www.daniellelmft.com. And when you go to that website, Danielle has a beautiful description of the services that she has. And do you have any suggestions on the best way to contact you?
So there's on my website, there's a little consult link, and you just push that button and it'll let you schedule a time to meet with me. And that'll give you a 15-minute free consultation where we can talk about what's going on with you, and you can talk about, and you can get to know me a little bit more, and then we can decide if we're a good fit and go from there. So,
and I just want to remind the viewers and listeners that consult is a way for you to get some guidance on how best to get your support. So even if you and Danielle aren't the best fit, she can provide you with references so that you can find these self-care skills that you need for yourself. And 15 minutes, and we know that Danielle is very open, and come ready with your questions, or don't come ready to just chat and check in. Thank you so much for your time. It is always such a pleasure to get to chat with you and to share your knowledge with our village. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I really enjoy doing this. It really is a passion of mine to help people get better at self-care because it's so important.
Isn't it? And it's a passion, I think, because we both have needed to do it in order to be as successful as we are. And because we went through the struggles ourselves, we really do know how important it is. Because I agree with you. It's definitely a soapbox that I get on all the time. And it's so important because it's so impactful, and you could say it on so many levels. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And for our listeners and viewers, this is not the last time you're going to hear from us on prioritizing self-care. And again, to find out more about Danielle and her practice, please visit her at her website. And we look forward to hearing from you.